Warning, this review, like all of my reviews, contains opinions. Be prepared to hear things you might not necessarily agree with. Hello everyone, I am Tessellating Hexagons, and yes, in case that warning and the flag behind me didn't give it away, it's now time for me to talk about my favourite Eurovision country, Sweden, and their Eurovision song this year. And as always, I'm not going to sugarcoat my opinion just because it's Sweden. If anything, I've been accused of giving Sweden a particularly hard time in my reviews compared to everyone else over the years that I've been doing this, and to that I say, A, have you considered the possibility that I'm just not dazzled by their flag and name in the same way that everyone else is? And 2, even if you think I am being unfair, if Sweden really is this incredible juggernaut of a country who can do no wrong, then surely they'd be able to stand up to harsher criticisms with no trouble whatsoever. That said, I feel like I may not actually need to pussyfoot around my opinions quite so much this year, because when all was said and done with Melodifestivalen, which I only watched the final of, by the way, the fandom was actually rather underwhelmed to discover that the show had been won by one Frans Jeppsson-Wall, I think I said that right, I don't know, whom I'd heard being described as a Swedish Justin Bieber, for better or for worse, and his song is called If I Were Sorry. It's in English, doesn't need to be translated. It's Sweden. So what are my first thoughts about this one? Well, the international juries described it as very catchy and bound to win Eurovision, and just, no. Even if there weren't a load of brilliant songs competing this year, this song would still be a middle-of-the-table effort, if that, in my opinion. My opinion, just saying. I seriously don't see why this one has been so hyped up, even within Sweden. I mean, within Melodifestivalen, people of Sweden aren't going to give it preferential treatment just because it's Swedish, like people would in Eurovision, because they're all Swedish. So I have no idea where the overhype for this song came from. You could say, oh, that's because it's topping the Swedish charts, Tess, and okay, I say to that, then why is it topping the Swedish charts? The bottom line is, Ireland have no reason to fear for their record number of wins this year. Lucky for me, for once, a fair amount of the fandom actually agrees with me on this one. It wasn't the best song of the Melodifestivalen lineup, and it's certainly not the best Eurovision song this year. You can be immature and dislike all you want, but the song really isn't that impressive, and representing this particular flag isn't going to change that. But let's still think about the good points, because these are fair reviews. So if I were being particularly harsh, I'd say this song's only redeeming features are that, like Austria last year, yup, it certainly is a song, and then I'd just end it there. But my reviews are fair, so let's give it due consideration, because it's a Eurovision song, and they all deserve equal consideration. Of course, as a Swedish entry, I still believe that people are going to give it more ground than it really deserves, and they might be quicker to forgive this song than they otherwise might be. That's just my perspective. If it were to represent a different country, they'd be a bit less forgiving for it. On principle, that's kind of a bad thing, because that's voting for the flag rather than the song. But I mean, it'll translate to points on the night, so that counts in its favour, so it's a good point, I suppose, I don't know. On a note that's completely irrelevant, but just as petty, as a strong advocate of good grammar, I'm not going to say grammar Nazi, because I think that kind of sounds offensive, but as an advocate of good grammar, I could completely appreciate the title of this song. A lot of people might not understand, native English speakers included. I think Frans speaks both English and Swedish natively, but still, even native English speakers might not understand that this kind of grammatical construction calls for the subjunctive voice in English, hence why it's if I were sorry instead of if I was. Hardly anyone actually uses that construction in common speech these days, and most people don't even know that it is the subjunctive voice, but you know, I have to give him credit for recognizing it. It's kind of the opposite effect of Poland spelling colour the wrong, American way in the title of their song, so I will concede. Well done there, you got that part right, Sweden. And I must give him credit on the subject matter of the song as well. It's nothing too new, but I can still appreciate the presentation of it, rather than it being a, baby, come back, you could blame it all on me. I was wrong and I just can't live without you. It's more of a, look at all these things that I would do if I were sorry. But guess what? I'm not sorry, so screw you! Nicely done, Sweden. Sincerely, that's nicely done. And finally, I will admit, it does sound like a song from the charts, as it is. Not a chart topper, in my opinion, but still something that they'd play on the radio, something that would still be in the top 40 in Sweden or in the UK. So the song does have substance. I won't deny that. It is a legitimate offering. But legitimate offering or not, just by being Swedish isn't enough to protect it from it having bad points. Again, if I were being overly harsh, I'd just write it off as boring, bland, uninteresting, and then scattergun a load of other hateful terms about the song without really explaining why I feel that way. But, again, I urge you lovely people to think rationally and calmly and objectively, and just look at the song on paper and see what would work against it in the contest. The song itself is of a very minimalist and safe genre. It doesn't really take many risks, and as a consequence, it comes across as comparatively, as I said, bland and uninteresting, but there's my reasoning behind it. It doesn't stick out as much, especially if you compare it to the likes of Hungary or Australia or even Sweden's neighbours Norway. Sometimes being that kind of different means you'll stand out. In this case, I think it just makes Sweden stick out as the designated bathroom break of the final for a lot of people. Like, that isn't necessarily my opinion, because unless I adamantly hate a song, I won't take bathroom breaks during Eurovision, because, I don't know, I'm good at holding it in like that, but that's far too much information. But unless I actively resent a song, I won't leave when it's on. But I think some people might be bored by this one, and so they might have it as their bathroom break. What doesn't help with this is his Melodifestivalen performance was just as uninteresting as the song. Yes, it was minimalist enough to match the song, and it's good that it matches, but there is a way to handle minimalist without it coming across as empty or forgettable, in air quotes. Take Cyprus from last year, for example, or Belgium from 2011. I still vividly remember everything that the background did behind Mr. Karagiannis for Cyprus, or I still remember those spinning white bars around Wittlof Bay. But Frans, all I remember is that it was really dark and the occasional word would appear next to him like he's the living embodiment of Sesame Street, and I don't know, the background was made to look like it was made of lower tech lighting for some reason. That's kind of, it didn't really stick with me. And also, this might just be a complete and utter me thing, but there's that one line about, I'd rob a bank and a post office too. That seems a bit of an incongruous thing to say. Like he was really desperate to kind of add to the imagery of that line. I mean, I get that stamps aren't the cheapest thing nowadays, but damn. And one other thing is the subject matter of the song itself. I did praise it for its clever execution, and I stand by that, but I do feel like some people could interpret it as a friend zone song. Like the message is him saying, oh, we were friends for a while, but then you said you didn't want to have sex, so you can go to hell. I don't think that's how it's intended at all, but this song could, according to some people, have a fedora feel to it, a fedora, if you will. If it was sung by a female artist, then nobody would say that, no one would even think that, so I don't think it applies to this song at all, but some people might get that feeling from it anyway. It's a matter of taste, I suppose, but that's probably not how it's intended. Now, my rating out of 10. Overall, yes, this song has some clever ideas, and it's popular within Sweden, but I just don't get the hype. Tell me something I don't know. But for its story and style, I'll still give it a 7 out of 10. It's not bad, but for Sweden, it is a bit of a disappointment, especially compared to what it was up against in the Melodifestivalen final. And I do think that it's overrated by the juries, because it is nothing special, especially compared to what Sweden is capable of. And since this rating out of 10 is partly drawn from my personal opinion, the song just flat out bores me. Depending on its running order draw, it wouldn't surprise me if this song just gets completely swallowed up by bigger, better songs in the final. Plus, the way the juries described it when they were voting in Melodifestivalen really rubbed me the wrong way. If a song is boring and minimalist, it's not catchy. It empirically cannot be catchy if you can't remember how it goes. That's just my thoughts on the matter. As I said, opinions ahoy, be forewarned, or post-warned as the case is now. So how does it compare to last year? Well, surprisingly, I feel pretty much equal about both this and Heroes. I recognise that both are chart toppers that are more popular with the juries than I personally think they deserve to be, and honestly, if you look at the split televoting and jury results for last year, you'll see that the juries did overrate Heroes, and that Il Volo was the public winner of the contest. That's the point that I'm comparing this to here. And I do recognise that musically, neither this nor Heroes are empirically bad songs, but neither particularly speak to me personally, and so they both leave me rather unimpressed, and at the end of the day, these reviews are at least partly my opinion. Given that it won and that due consideration was given to the staging, even though the staging never changed at all, apart from making the Chalk Boy a bit fatter, and despite how little of it was actual original content, Heroes is probably the better Eurovision song. For all its faults that almost nobody is willing to acknowledge or admit, it did still keep a captive audience throughout the performance. You could say a lot about Måns' song, but you can't say that it was boring or forgettable. Meanwhile, what was the song I was comparing Heroes to again? I've completely forgotten how it goes. But I jest. In all seriousness, would Frans qualify if he had to? Of course, being last year's winner and this year's host, he doesn't have to qualify, but if it did, in my opinion, I don't think it would deserve to, especially if it were in the first semi-final. In the final, of course, I think the juries will almost definitely hype this up if Melodifestivalen was anything to judge by, and he might get points off the back of the public being hyped up because they were told to, because he is in the charts, don't you know? And of course, representing Sweden will help a lot with that, so it probably would qualify if it had to. However, if this song were to represent any other country, I think it would have significantly lower chances of qualifying. I don't think it would get anywhere near as much sympathy if it were to represent, say, Portugal or Ireland or whatever. I think people would listen to it and think, oh, well, this is unimpressive and not very interesting. People wouldn't try to find excuses to justify it, but that's just what I think, and I do still think it's a valid song. I'll give Frans credit there. But if Sweden hadn't won last year, I don't think they'd be in the final this year, if the world was a just place anyway. But don't try to tell me that I don't get it or that I'm being jealous, because, no, it's an alright song. Just, I think overall I feel about it the way I feel about Spain's song. Yeah, it's alright. It's just not worth all that hype. Like, it's a 7 out of 10, which is still a passing grade. It's just not a 50 out of 10. And 7 doesn't seem much compared to 50, but 7 out of 10 is still more than half, so, It's an alright song, it just, it doesn't grab me personally, but if you like it, then that's fine. You're allowed to. I'm not the opinion police. So I will say, good luck, Sweden, I suppose I should wish you luck because I'm being fair. Like I said, the song doesn't really grab me personally, but I mean, it has its fans. Just, please don't get a load of points from the juries just for being Sweden, because just rate the song, not the country. That's all I'm going to say on the matter. So yeah, we'll see you in May. See you then.